Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. The forest began where the road ended. There was no signpost, no marker, no gate, only the quiet, dark green of trees rising like ancient pillars from a bed of moss and fallen needles. One moment there was asphalt beneath the hiker's boots, the next, soil softened by centuries of leaf rot. The morning sun hung low behind a gray veil of cloud, making it hard to tell the time. The air smelled clean, too clean, untouched, like it hadn't been breathed by anyone in years. He stepped forward. Crunch. His boot pressed down on a patch of dry leaves, brittle and brown despite the recent rains. Around him, the forest was still. Not silent, no forest ever truly is, but eerily still. No birdsong, no chittering of squirrels, no buzzing of insects. Only the occasional rustle of wind brushing through high branches like fingers combing through hair. He adjusted the straps of his backpack and walked deeper in. The trail was faint, more of a suggestion than a path, a slight thinning in the underbrush where others might have walked before. Or perhaps animals. Or perhaps nothing. Maybe the trail simply formed on its own, as though the forest knew he was coming. He told himself that was silly, but the thought stuck. Each step took him farther from the edge, from the car, from the map, from the edge of things. He wasn't afraid, not yet. He'd hiked alone before. He liked solitude. Out here, it was just him and the trees, and he had hoped that would be enough to clear his head. He didn't know how far he'd go. He hadn't planned an exact route. He only knew he was supposed to follow the first trail, the one the old man had mentioned at the gas station, the man with the milky eye and the crooked fingers who had said, "If you're looking for quiet, there's a trail that starts past the bend. Don't see many come back from it." The man had smiled like he was telling a joke. He hadn't laughed. The forest closed in slowly, not in any obvious way, but with a creeping density. Trees stood closer together now, their trunks mossy and broad. Vines hung low across the path. The light shifted above, becoming a dappled patchwork of soft gold and pale green. And still, no birds. He paused to take a breath and a sip of water. The forest seemed to hold its own breath in turn. He looked around. To the left, a rotting stump, carved out by time and insects. To the right, a tree with a long gash in its bark, as if something had clawed it years ago. The edges of the wound had blackened, as though burned. Straight ahead, the trail. Still there. Still waiting. He resumed walking. As the morning wore on, the terrain changed subtly. The earth beneath his boots became softer, almost springy, like it was breathing underfoot. Ferns grew larger here, brushing his thighs. The wind had vanished. The air hung thick with the scent of sap and lichen and something else, something faint and metallic, like rust or blood, just at the edge of perception. He tried to ignore it. Probably just minerals in the soil. He kept walking. By now, he should have seen a stream, or at least heard one. According to the old map he'd glanced at, the trail passed a narrow creek within the first 2 miles. But there was no water, only the endless hush of trees. His watch said it was nearly noon. But the light had dimmed. He frowned and looked up. Clouds, thick and unmoving, rolled overhead. It was as if the sun had been veiled, not by weather, but by the forest itself. The canopy swayed gently, but no wind reached the ground. Then he noticed something else. The trail was gone. He stopped mid-step, heart pausing in his chest. He turned slowly in place. The path he had followed, the faint thread through the underbrush, was no longer behind him. No flattened grass. No boot prints. Nothing. He took a step back. Still nothing. Had he wandered off? He reached into his jacket and pulled out the compass clipped to his zipper. The needle spun. He stared at it, tapping the plastic face. Still spinning. Faulty, he muttered. Should have brought the GPS. But that had been the point, no tech, no distractions. Just him and nature. He glanced at the trees. Maybe he could mark one. He drew a small knife from his side pouch and approached the nearest trunk. The bark was smooth, almost polished, a deep charcoal brown. He pressed the blade to the wood. A strange thing happened. The moment the metal touched bark, a line of moisture seeped from the tree, dark red like blood. He recoiled, heart thudding. A trick of sap, maybe, some tree species bled red. But the smell that rose was sharp and coppery. Not sap. Not normal. He backed away and sheathed the knife. The wind returned, sudden and cold, brushing against the back of his neck like a breath. He spun around, but there was nothing behind him. Okay, he said aloud, trying to steady his breathing. Stay calm. Stay rational. He took out his water bottle and drank again. The liquid tasted flat, somehow wrong, like it had been sitting too long. He put the bottle away. Then, from far off, a sound. Not a voice. Not words. Just a pattern. A rhythm. A slow, steady knocking, wood on wood. Or bone on bark. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. Knock. 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 He turned toward the sound. And despite every instinct, he began walking in its direction. The forest thickened. Branches curled low, as if trying to catch him. Thorns snagged his sleeves. The moss underfoot grew slick and wet. The knocking sound grew louder, more distinct, more deliberate. It echoed strangely, not from a single direction but all around. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind. No sound. Not even the rustle of leaves. He was just about to call out when he saw it, a tree ahead, larger than the rest. Its bark was bone white, its branches bare. It stood in a clearing devoid of underbrush, as though nothing dared grow near it. At its base, a shape. He stepped closer, heart in his throat. The shape was human-sized, lying prone, face down. A hiker, or what had once been a hiker. The clothes were faded and torn, half covered in moss. The figure's skin, where visible, was gray and sunken. No obvious wounds. No blood. Just, emptied. He took a step back. And saw that the white tree was marked, carved all over with strange, looping symbols. Not letters. Not anything human. The carving spiraled up the trunk like vines. As he stared, the symbols seemed to move. He blinked. They were still. Just the light, he whispered. Just my mind playing tricks. He turned to leave the clearing. And paused. The forest behind him had changed. The trees were closer together now, their trunks crooked like bent limbs. The trail, if it had ever existed, was gone again. The silence pressed in, thick and hot. He could feel sweat pooling at his back despite the chill. Then, once more, the knocking. Knock. 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 But this time, closer. This time, not in the distance, but among the trees, just out of sight. He didn't run. Not yet. But his pace quickened. As he walked, the forest grew stranger. Trees leaned inward. Roots writhed underfoot like veins. Some of the branches were tied with strings of feathers, bones, and dried flowers, offerings? Warnings? A deer skull hung from one tree, hollow eyes facing downward, mouth open in a silent scream. He walked faster. Time stretched oddly. He checked his watch. Still noon. Still. No movement. The second hand was frozen. He tapped it. Nothing. He left the trail, if there had ever been one, and pushed through thick ferns. He needed to find higher ground, a clearing, anything. The forest couldn't go on forever. Could it? Then, ahead, light. Real light. He stumbled into a wide glade bathed in golden sunshine. The air felt warmer here, almost peaceful. Bees buzzed lazily around a patch of wildflowers. A few birds chirped from the trees above. It was as if he'd stepped into a different world. He stood there, confused, relieved, suspicious. Was he out? He turned back to look where he came from. There was no path behind him. Only trees. Only darkness. And at the edge of the clearing, just inside the shadow line, a figure. Tall. Thin. Wrapped in bark and leaves. No face. No eyes. Just a long slit where a mouth might be. It didn't move. But he felt it watching. Then it lifted one arm and pointed, not at him, but at the heart of the forest. And without knowing why, he turned, and walked back in. The forest felt different now. Denser. Thicker. Every tree seemed older, every shadow darker. He didn't remember it being this quiet before. Not truly. Even silence in nature has texture, the far-off calls of birds, the skitter of insects, the hum of wind through leaves. But this silence was perfect. Artificial. The kind of silence that swallowed sound rather than held its absence. He walked. The figure he had seen in the clearing, the bark-covered being with no face, was gone when he looked back. Whether it had vanished, dissolved, or simply never existed in the first place, he couldn't say. But its message had been clear, even without words: go deeper. Why he obeyed, he didn't know. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, and this thought struck him like a chill down the spine, he'd never had a choice. He tried to mark his path. Each time he passed a distinctive tree, he tied a length of red cord from his backpack around the trunk. The cord was bright and synthetic, an obvious marker in the dull greens and browns of the forest. But every time he looked back, the cord was gone. It wasn't that the tree was missing, the tree remained, its shape unmistakable. But the cord was never there. Like it had never been tied. Like he had only imagined doing it. So he tried scratching the bark instead. Small, shallow excess with his knife. But the bark closed over them the moment he turned away. The forest healed itself, or worse, it refused to be marked. Hours passed. He followed what trails he could find, but they all led back on themselves. One narrow path curved downhill for what felt like a mile, only to emerge near a tree he distinctly remembered from earlier, one with a long gouge in its trunk that resembled a mouth. Another path split 3 ways. He took the left fork, walked for 20 minutes, and found himself back at the same fork again, this time from the right side. He was looping. Trapped in concentric spirals. He screamed once, not out of fear but frustration. The sound felt wrong, muffled, like yelling into a blanket. It didn't echo. It didn't carry. The trees seemed to absorb the sound completely. The forest was a maze, but not one built by humans. This place was old. Older than old. Older than memory. He stopped to rest near a fallen log covered in moss and tiny red mushrooms. Pulling off his pack, he sat, checked his water. Half gone. Food? A few trail bars and dried fruit. He wasn't worried yet, he could ration. It wasn't about survival. It was about direction. He considered climbing a tree. Maybe from above, he could get a sense of the terrain. But every trunk he approached was impossibly smooth, with no low branches to grab. The bark flaked under his fingers, almost like skin. Then he noticed the roots. They were shifting. Not fast, not overtly, but they weren't fixed. When he looked away and looked back, they'd changed position slightly. Like they were crawling. Slowly. Purposefully. He stood and backed away. The log he had been sitting on was gone. No, not gone. Moved. It now lay 20 feet away. He didn't run. Not yet. But his walk became brisk. The trees changed again. Now they were thinner, taller, with bark like stretched sinew and branches that hung low, draped in curtains of pale moss. The moss seemed to sway in patterns that defied the wind, like fingers beckoning him forward. He followed a stream, or what sounded like one, but never found water. The sound moved as he did, always a little ahead, never where he expected. Then, for the first time in hours, he found something man-made, a signpost. It was crude, made from 2 sticks bound with twine, jammed into the earth. No words, just a single arrow carved into the wood, pointing left. He stared at it. About time, he muttered, and turned left. The path narrowed, the light dimmed. The moss grew thicker. The arrow had pointed him into a tunnel of trees, so tightly knit that the canopy above was nearly solid. He walked for what felt like half an hour. And emerged, back at the signpost. He stood there, stunned. There was no mistaking it. Same crude sticks. Same twine. Same arrow. He checked his watch. The hands hadn't moved. Was it broken? Or was time breaking with him? He tried going the other way. Right. Then straight through the underbrush. He even tried walking directly away from the post with no path at all, forging through ferns and vines and mud. Each time, he returned. Back to the sign. Back to the arrow. The sun, if it still existed, had long since vanished. The light filtering through the canopy was dim, dreamlike. He no longer knew if it was evening or midday or something else entirely. Finally, he sat down beside the post. The air felt heavier now. Breathing took effort. He leaned his head back against the sign and closed his eyes. He dreamed. In the dream, the forest spoke. Not with a voice, but with sensation. With pressure. With memory. He stood among trees that breathed, their trunks expanding and contracting like lungs. The moss pulsed with blood. Leaves whispered his name. You are not the first. You will not be the last. All paths return. All paths begin. He reached out to touch a tree. It opened like an eye. He fell into darkness. He woke with a start. The sign was gone. He stood quickly, heart racing. The forest was different again. The moss had receded. The air was dry. The trees were spaced wider apart. There was a new path ahead, not marked, but clear. He didn't question it. He followed. As he walked, he noticed symbols carved into the bark of certain trees. Not the same as before. These were angular, sharp, geometric. They glowed faintly in the dim light, pulsing with some inner heat. He touched one. It was warm. And for a brief moment, he remembered something, a face. His own? No, someone else. A woman. Pale eyes. Soft voice. A warning. Then it was gone. He moved faster. He came upon a clearing filled with bones. Not human, at least, not entirely. Deer skulls. Rib cages. Vertebrae too large for any known animal. All arranged in spirals, circles, patterns. At the center, a stone. Obsidian black. Smooth. Tall as a man. He approached. The stone vibrated faintly as he neared it. It sang, not a song, exactly, but a hum just below the threshold of hearing. It resonated in his chest. He reached out. His fingers brushed the surface, and suddenly, he was elsewhere. A hallway. Stone walls. No ceiling. The sky above was deep red, stars swirling like whirlpools. He walked. Doors lined the hallway, each marked with different symbols. Some glowed. Some bled. He opened a door. Inside, a mirror. He looked in. His reflection was wrong. Older. Eyes hollow. Bark growing from his skin. He reached up to touch his face, and the reflection did not. It smiled. He fell back. Back into the forest. Gasping, kneeling beside the obsidian stone. The bones were gone. So was the clearing. Now he stood in a grove of silver trees. Their leaves shimmered like metal. The path ahead glowed faintly. He rose, shaken. But he walked. What else could he do? The forest was watching. Waiting. And the path, however twisted, was still a path. And still, he followed. There is a particular kind of silence that settles not around you, but in you. A hush that doesn't merely fill the world outside but creeps beneath your skin, dulling the edges of thought. That was the silence now, after the golden clearing, after the faceless figure had pointed deeper into the woods. A silence not of absence, but of observation. He felt it as he walked. Someone was watching. No, many were watching. But whenever he turned his head, the trees remained still and indifferent, tall and weather-worn. Whatever watched him did not need to move to be seen. It didn't need breath. It didn't even need a face. Still, the sensation hung behind every step like a second shadow. The trail, if it could be called that, shifted subtly beneath him. He had long given up on footprints, on directional sense. There were no stars to guide by, no sun to trust. His watch still read the same time it had before, 12:03. He no longer believed the battery was dead. He walked until his legs ached, then walked more. When he finally rested, it was beside a shallow dip in the land, where black water pooled at the roots of a crooked willow. He didn't remember sitting. The trees around him formed a tight ring, like an amphitheater. No wind moved within. The air was wet, heavy, almost too thick to breathe. He leaned against the trunk and closed his eyes, just for a moment. That was the first mistake. The dream was not a dream. He was standing. The forest was the same, but the colors were wrong. The leaves pulsed with an inner red glow, dim and heartbeat-like. The trees reached higher than before, impossibly tall, as if scraping something far above sky. The soil beneath his feet was dry and cracked, and from each crack rose whispers. Actual voices. Dozens. Hundreds. He couldn't make out the words, they spoke too fast, overlapped too tightly, but the tone was clear: anger, grief, hunger. And accusation. He turned in a slow circle. No clear path here either. Just the red-lit forest and the chorus of whispering ground. Then he noticed them. Eyes. Not glowing, not cartoonish like horror movies, but real. Human eyes, in tree knots and hollows. In mossy stumps. Even hanging suspended in midair like tears frozen in time. None blinked. All stared. He stumbled backward and fell. The ground was not ground. It pulsed like skin. From it sprouted fingers, gnarled, bark-covered fingers reaching up as though to grasp, or beg. He crawled away, screaming silently. Then, a hand gripped his ankle. He turned to see, snap. He jolted awake. The willow's branches swayed above him, slow and lazy. The pool was still. But something had broken a twig, not far. He stood quickly and backed away. His stomach growled, but he felt no hunger. His throat was dry, but the water in the pool looked black and wrong. He pressed forward, choosing a direction at random. Every direction was wrong. But moving felt better than stillness. He came upon a fork in the trail. Two paths. Identical. He took the left one, hoping. 10 minutes later, he passed a tree with a long gash in the bark, the same one he had seen before. The edges of the wound curled inward, darker than ever. He had looped back. Again, the same fork. This time, the right path. Again, the gashed tree. He cursed under his breath. Looked around. No signs. No carvings to follow. But then, something new. A figure, far ahead, barely visible through the fog. Tall. Human-shaped. Not moving. His breath caught. The figure wore a dark coat, its head tilted downward. It stood perfectly still in the middle of the trail. No sound. No acknowledgement. He waited. Watched. No movement. He took a cautious step forward. Then another. The figure did not stir. He walked closer, slow and silent. Maybe a hiker. Maybe someone lost like him. Maybe, the figure vanished. No transition, no shift. One moment it stood there, the next, only mist remained. He stared at the space it had occupied. And noticed something etched into the dirt, a spiral. Rough, hand-drawn. It hadn't been there before. He stared at it for a long time. Then stepped over it, and kept walking. The forest changed again. The trees grew thinner, more spaced out. The fog thickened, curling low across the ground like smoke. The air grew warmer, almost humid. He could hear water now, the soft babble of a stream or brook. Relief touched him like a brief hand on the shoulder. He followed the sound. It led him to a narrow creek, its waters flowing sluggishly between banks of black stone. It was the first truly natural thing he had seen since entering. He knelt beside it and touched the water. Cool. Real. He drank. The taste was clean, but faintly metallic, again that hint of iron, like rust or old blood. Still, it was water. And it quenched something primal. He sat on a stone and watched the water ripple. In the current, he noticed something, a piece of fabric caught on a submerged branch. Faded blue, like denim. He reached for it. And something pulled back. Not violently, gently. But with purpose. The fabric slid into the water and vanished. He stood and backed away. Across the creek, he saw another figure, not the one from before. This one crouched low, half hidden by a fallen tree. Its face was long and pale, like paper stretched too tight. Its eyes glinted like obsidian marbles. Its arms were too long. It watched. And when it saw that it had been seen, it smiled. Not with its mouth, but with its entire face. The skin rippled upward, cracking in places, revealing dark lines beneath. Then it sank behind the tree, gone. He did not follow. He ran. Not blindly, not in panic, but with purpose. He no longer cared which way was correct. He just needed distance. Trees whipped by. Branches tore at his sleeves. Thorns raked his hands. But he did not stop. He only stopped when he collapsed. The ground was soft here. Spongy. A patch of moss and ferns in a small hollow. He curled into himself, heart racing, breath heaving. And again, the silence. This time, it felt satisfied. Time passed. The light dimmed, though the sky never changed. He woke from half-sleep to the sound of something, breathing. Not close. Not threatening. But large. Slow. Rhythmic. He rose carefully and crept up the hollow's edge. What he saw froze him in place. Below, in a deeper dip in the earth, lay something massive. Covered in vines, half buried in soil, breathing. Slowly. It looked like a tree from above. But it was not a tree. It had limbs. Dozens. Stretched outward like roots. Its body was gray and ridged like bark, but too smooth. And where a face should be, a knot, pulsing like a heartbeat. He stepped back. And a twig cracked underfoot. The knot opened. Inside, an eye. It stared up at him. And a word came to his mind. Not spoken. Not heard. Just, placed. Watcher. He ran again, blindly this time. He didn't stop until his lungs burned and legs screamed. When he did, he found himself back at the same creek. Same black stones. Same water. Same submerged branch. But now the branch held a different thing, a necklace. One he recognized. His. He wore it under his shirt, always. He reached to touch it. Still around his neck. He looked again. The same necklace. As if there were two of him. Or had been. He didn't pick it up. He turned and walked back into the trees. The forest narrowed into a corridor of leaning pines, their limbs hanging low like curtains. Here, the ground was bare, the air dead. No wind. No life. He walked slowly. Something moved beside him. He turned, and saw himself. Not a reflection. Not a shadow. A second version of him, walking in sync, just behind a wall of trees. Pale-faced. Hollow-eyed. Mouth moving, silently. He stopped. The double kept walking. Then it turned its head and smiled, a grotesque stretch of skin and teeth. And kept walking. Then vanished into the mist. He stood there, heart pounding. Then he laughed. Just once. Sharp. Dry. None of it made sense. He had passed sense miles ago. Now there was only instinct. And the feeling that he was being herded, not hunted, not chased, guided. Like prey through a maze. Or a pilgrim through ritual. Eventually, he came to a circle of standing stones. 8 of them. Each etched with spirals. At the center, a stone bowl, empty but stained red. He stepped into the circle. And the forest sighed. The wind returned. Leaves rustled. A single bird cried out, the first he had heard in hours. It sounded lost. He stood there for a long time, not moving. Then a voice spoke behind him. A woman's voice. Gentle. Worn. You're almost ready. He turned, and saw no one. But the trees felt warmer now. The ground steadier. He stepped from the circle. And the world changed again. He walked now through places he didn't remember entering. A grove where every tree grew in the shape of a person. A clearing littered with shoes, old, weather-beaten, every size. A tree bearing names carved in hundreds of languages. He touched none of them. He walked until his legs refused. Then he lay beneath a weeping cedar and stared at the unmoving sky. He thought he saw stars behind the gray. But they blinked in patterns, not light. Like eyes. He slept. And the watchers came closer. Not seen. Not heard. But near. He felt them in his dreams, circling. Waiting. He dreamt of drowning in roots. They wound around him like serpents, cold and damp, pulsing as if with blood. He couldn't breathe. The soil pressed against his eyes, filled his mouth, crushed his ribs. But beneath the pressure there was a whisper, not a word, but a feeling: submit. He woke to find his hands sunk wrist-deep into the earth, fingers curled around nothing. The sky had not changed. Still that sickly pale gray, neither dawn nor dusk. The air was warm now, dense. Everything smelled of decay. The clearing he had collapsed in had vanished. So had the trail. He was somewhere new again. And something had shifted. The forest no longer felt merely watchful, it felt aware. It wanted something. And it was waiting. He stood and brushed dirt from his palms. His fingers trembled. He couldn't tell if it was from cold or fear anymore. His body's compass for emotion was broken. What little logic he had left whispered to keep moving. So he did. The terrain was uneven now. Jagged roots jutted from the ground like bones. The trees here were wider, older, their bark twisted into grotesque knots that resembled faces frozen in silent screams. As he walked, he passed a dead fox. Then another. Then a third. Each one more decayed, more twisted. The final fox was missing its eyes. And in their place, moss. Fresh, green moss, growing from the sockets. He kept walking. After an hour, or maybe a day, he came upon the tree. It stood alone in a ring of scorched earth, as if fire had tried to destroy it but failed. The trunk was enormous, wider than any he'd seen, but blackened like charcoal. The bark peeled in long strips, and each strip bore the shape of hands. Hands clawing. Hands reaching. The tree was hollow. Not cracked or split, open, like a door. He approached it with reverence, the way one might approach a grave or altar. Something about the tree drew him, not with comfort but with inevitability. He stepped into its darkness. Inside, the world changed. The temperature dropped instantly. The walls of the hollow were smooth, almost polished. He couldn't see where the space ended. His footsteps made no sound. There were carvings inside, deep and ancient. Spirals again. Circles. A triangle with an eye in its center. And words. In English, yes, but old. Worn. He traced one with his finger: return what you took. He frowned. He had taken nothing. Had he? Further in, the tunnel narrowed. Roots pressed inward like ribs. Shapes were carved into them, faces, perhaps, or masks. It was hard to tell. He crawled now. The passage grew tighter. And the air pulsed. He wasn't alone. At the end of the tunnel, he emerged into a chamber deep within the tree. A natural room, impossibly large for the trunk's size. The walls glowed faintly with green bioluminescence. The floor was carpeted in fungus, soft and damp. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of gnarled wood. Upon it, a box. Small. Black. Covered in red twine. He didn't want to touch it. Every instinct screamed at him not to. But he stepped forward. Closer. The box pulsed. A soft heartbeat. Echoing his own. He reached out, the tree groaned. A low, guttural sound that came from all directions at once. And behind him, the tunnel closed. No exit. Just him. And the box. He opened it. Inside, a tooth. Human. Large. Yellowed. And next to it, a photograph. Of him. Asleep. In his bed. That same night. He stared. His own face. Peaceful. Eyes shut. Oblivious. The box fell from his hands. He backed away. And the tree spoke. Not aloud. But inside him. A voice without tone. Neither male nor female. You were chosen. He shook his head. For what? To remember. Remember what? The bargain. He stepped backward until he touched the glowing wall. What bargain? The voice softened. You asked for silence. He blinked. A memory stirred. A wish. A night long ago. As a child, hands clasped, whispering to the dark, I want the world to go quiet. Just for a little while. A childish wish. A selfish wish. He had forgotten. The voice returned. And the forest answered. He fell to his knees. This wasn't just a dream. It wasn't madness. It was consequence. He looked up at the pedestal. The box had vanished. In its place stood a mirror. He saw himself. But it wasn't him. The figure in the mirror smiled, thin, too wide. Its eyes were dark pits. And then it stepped forward, out of the mirror. And into the chamber. He scrambled back. The thing wore his face like a mask. It tilted its head. Then whispered, You're free now. And lunged. He didn't remember the struggle. Only the pain. White hot. Splitting. And then, darkness. When he woke, he was lying in the clearing again. The sky was the same. But he was different. He felt hollow. Like something had been scooped out of him. He touched his face. It still felt like his. But when he looked down, the box was back in his hands. Still tied shut. But heavier. He opened it. Inside, the tooth again. But now there were 3 more. And another photo. Not him. Someone else. A stranger. Asleep in their bed. The forest rustled around him. Not threatening. Welcoming. He stood. And understood. The hollow tree was not a prison. It was a gate. And he had passed through. From far off in the woods, he heard footsteps. Someone else. Wandering. Lost. He waited. Smiling. The fog came without warning. One moment the forest was clear, the next, it was swallowed in white, thick and choking. He had barely taken a few steps from the clearing where the hollow tree stood, and already his vision blurred. The trees dissolved into shadowy outlines, the underbrush became a wet whisper beneath his boots. The air grew colder, damp seeping into his bones. He stopped. The silence was absolute, crushing. No birds. No wind. No footsteps other than his own. His breath came out in visible puffs, slow and steady. Something moved just beyond the edge of his sight, a shifting in the mist, like a living shape trying to emerge. His heart hammered. He whispered, Hello? No answer. Only the fog. He stepped forward. The path beneath him vanished. There was only mud now, sticky and cold. He slipped. Caught himself on a branch. His hands were trembling. He tried to steady his breathing, but the cold made it shallow. Where was he going? What was he looking for? The fog thickened. Shapes began to take form. Figures. People? Or shadows? He blinked. The shapes retreated. He was alone. A sudden noise startled him, a branch snapping to his left. He spun, eyes searching. Nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched burned at his skin. He called out again, louder this time. Who's there? A voice answered. Low and ragged. Lost, it was barely more than a whisper, carried on the breath of the fog. He followed it. The voice led him deeper into the mist. His feet sank in mud. Roots grabbed at his ankles. The air was thick with something rotten and sweet, like decaying fruit. Then he saw it. A figure standing among the trees. Tall, thin, face hidden beneath a hood. It beckoned. He approached cautiously. "Who are you?" he asked. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand and pointed. Farther ahead, a faint light flickered. He moved toward it. The light came from a fire. Around it, others sat. People? No. Their faces were pale, eyes empty, smiles too wide and slow. They did not speak. They watched. One rose. Walked toward him. Its movements unnatural, jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. The air was thick with a scent like wet ash. The figure stopped before him. It reached out a hand, cold, clammy. He wanted to pull away but found himself frozen. The hand closed around his wrist. The grip was strong. Pain flared. He struggled. The other figures rose too. Surrounding him. Their eyes glowing faintly. A voice echoed inside his head. "Remember the promise." He shook his head. "What promise?" "Silence," the voice whispered. "Quiet. Peace." He screamed. The figures smiled. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide. The fog thickened. He woke to himself, alone in the clearing. The fire was gone. The figures vanished. But their presence lingered. The fog remained. And he knew the forest was calling him back. The fog hadn't lifted. It clung to the forest like a shroud, thickening with every step he took. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted limbs reaching out as if to snatch him from the path. The damp earth beneath his boots seemed to pulse with a heartbeat not his own. His throat was dry, and his lips cracked from the cold moisture in the air. The only sound was the soft squelch of mud and leaves crushed beneath his feet. But beneath that, something else began to surface, a faint murmur, distant yet unmistakable. Whispers. At first, he thought it was the wind weaving through the branches. Then the whispers grew clearer, curling around his mind like tendrils of smoke. They spoke in a language that twisted his tongue, a half-remembered dialect, ancient and full of longing. He stopped. The whispers coalesced, forming words just beyond his comprehension. "Come, return, join," the voice was both beckoning and warning. He stepped forward again, drawn deeper by the sound. The trees thinned, revealing a tangled thicket. Brambles and thorny vines blocked the way, but the whispers seeped through the gaps. He pushed through, scraping his arms on the sharp leaves, ignoring the sting. On the other side, the forest opened into a small glade bathed in pale moonlight. The fog swirled here like restless spirits, and in the center stood a stone pedestal, ancient and covered with lichen. Upon the pedestal lay a book. Its leather cover was cracked and blackened. Strange symbols shimmered faintly on its surface, glowing faintly with a cold blue light. He hesitated. His fingers trembled as he reached for it. The moment he touched the book, the whispers ceased. An eerie silence blanketed the glade. He opened the book. The pages were brittle, filled with writing that moved and shifted as he looked at it. The words were in a script that seemed to breathe, the letters curling and twisting like living things. His eyes scanned the pages. There were stories, tales of the forest, of creatures both cruel and kind, of bargains made in shadows and blood. And then, a passage caught his eye: to escape the endless night, one must give the forest a gift. A token of self, a price paid in flesh or memory. Only then will the path open, and the watcher's gaze fall away. He closed the book with a snap. What was he being asked to give? A sudden rustling in the thicket made him spin around. A figure stood there, another wanderer, perhaps, or a specter born of the forest's will. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the moonlight like twin stars, her hair tangled with leaves and dirt. "Do you read the book?" she asked softly. He nodded. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "The forest tests all who enter," she said. "It asks for more than you expect." "More than what?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Your memories. Your past. Your soul." The whispers returned, louder now, threading through the night air. He felt his mind pull toward the shadows, as if memories were being unraveled from deep inside. He clutched his head, struggling to hold on. Faces, names, places, all slipping away like mist. "Don't forget," the woman said urgently. "Hold on to yourself. The forest feeds on forgetting." He nodded, swallowing hard. The woman reached out a hand. "Come with me." They moved through the forest together, deeper into the thicket. The trees grew thicker, the air heavier. He could feel the forest pressing in on all sides, its breath hot against his skin. Every now and then, the whispers returned, urging him to surrender, to forget. But the woman's presence was steady, a beacon of light in the growing darkness. They reached a circle of ancient stones. Symbols carved deep into their surfaces glowed faintly. "This is the heart of the forest's memory," she said. "To resist, you must bind yourself here. Offer a token." He looked down at his hands. What could he offer? Memories were slipping through his fingers. Identity fraying. He closed his eyes and recalled a moment from long ago, warm sunlight on a summer day, laughter with a friend he'd lost, the scent of rain on dry earth. He clutched that memory tight. When he opened his eyes, the stones pulsed brighter. The woman smiled, gently pressing a finger to his lips. "Good. But the forest will try again." Suddenly, the ground trembled. Roots burst through the soil, twisting upward like serpents. The whispers turned to chants. From the shadows emerged figures, shapes of bark and bone, faces carved from stone. They circled him. Watching. Waiting. The woman stepped forward. "We must keep the circle unbroken," she said. Together they formed a barrier of will and memory. The figures howled in frustration, unable to break through. The fog swirled violently. Lightning flashed, illuminating the faces in the trees. He stood firm, heart pounding. The forest raged around them, but inside the circle, there was a fragile peace. The woman took his hand. "Stay with me," she said. "Or be lost forever." He nodded. Together, they waited for dawn. Dawn did not come as expected. The forest remained shrouded in a gray gloom, as if caught between night and day, trapped in an eternal twilight. He and the woman remained inside the circle of stones, their hands still intertwined, the fragile boundary holding at bay the hunger of the forest's shadow creatures. But the weight of the waiting pressed down like a physical force. His limbs ached. His mind felt stretched thin, like a thread ready to snap. The woman's gaze was steady, but even she seemed weary. "We need to find the veil," she said finally, her voice a whisper. "The veil?" "Yes. It's the boundary between this world and the next. If we can reach it, maybe we can escape." He swallowed hard. "How do we find it?" She shook her head. "No one knows exactly. But the forest, it shifts, and sometimes it reveals paths that were hidden." The forest around them pulsed with life, the trees seeming to breathe in slow, heavy rhythms. They stepped out of the circle, the stone's glow fading behind them. The fog clung tighter now, cold fingers wrapping around their ankles. They moved cautiously, senses alert for any sign of movement. Branches scraped against their skin, and the whispers returned, more insistent than ever. But the woman hummed a low tune, an old lullaby, and the voices softened, retreating into the mist. They came upon a fallen tree, its roots exposed and curling like a gateway. The woman knelt, pressing her palm against the bark. A shimmer appeared, a veil of translucent light, flickering like heat waves on a summer road. "This is it," she breathed. He reached out, but the veil rippled and pulled away, teasing. "It won't let us pass so easily," she said. "We have to offer it something." He looked at her, confusion mingling with hope. "Something, like what?" She smiled sadly. "A secret." He hesitated. What secret could he give? He thought of the photographs in the hollow tree's box. The tooth. The promises. The whispered bargains. Could he give up his past to save himself? The woman stepped forward. "I'll go first." She whispered something to the veil. The light flared, then parted, revealing a narrow path beyond. She beckoned him. "Come." They crossed through the veil, stepping into a different world. The trees here were taller, their leaves shimmering with silver light. The air smelled of rain and something ancient. The fog was gone. But the feeling of being watched remained. Ahead, a figure waited. Tall, cloaked, face hidden. The forest's guardian. "It's time," the guardian said, voice echoing like a bell. "You must choose." He swallowed hard. "Choose what?" "To give or to take." The woman stepped forward. "To give is to sacrifice a memory, a piece of yourself, to the forest. To take is to claim a secret from its depths, but at a cost." He looked at the woman. She nodded. "Be careful." The guardian raised a hand. A glowing orb appeared. It showed scenes from his life, moments of joy, pain, love, and loss. He saw himself as a child, laughing with his mother. He saw a face he loved, now gone. He saw the nights spent alone, wishing for silence. The orb pulsed. The choice was clear. Give or take. Sacrifice or steal. He stepped forward. And whispered his choice. His voice barely rose above a whisper as he spoke the word. "I give." The guardian nodded slowly. "The forest accepts your sacrifice." The glowing orb expanded, wrapping around him like a cocoon of light. Memories flashed, laughter, tears, names he hadn't thought of in years, then began to fade, slipping away like grains of sand through fingers. He felt a hollowing deep within, as if a part of his soul was being carved out. Pain blossomed, sharp and cold. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to scream. When the light receded, he was changed. The woman looked at him with sad eyes. "You did well," she said softly. "But the forest is patient. It will ask more." He nodded. The path ahead was uncertain. They moved forward, the silver trees shimmering around them. The air was heavy with a new weight, a mix of hope and despair. The woman led him toward a river, its waters dark and still. "This river carries the memories forgotten," she explained. "To cross it, you must leave a piece of yourself behind." He looked at the water, then back at her. "How?" "By telling a secret you've never spoken aloud." He hesitated. What secret did he hold deep enough to surrender? The riverbank was silent except for the soft lapping of water. He knelt and whispered into the night, "I wished for silence, because I was afraid of the noise inside my own head." The woman watched, her eyes gentle. As the words left him, the river shimmered, and a path of stones emerged, glowing faintly. They stepped onto the stones, crossing the river one careful step at a time. On the other side, the forest changed again. The trees were blackened, twisted into grotesque shapes. The whispers had returned, but this time they were screams. He covered his ears. But the woman pulled him forward. "We must face the darkness within the forest to find the truth." Deeper into the woods, the shadows thickened. Figures appeared, faces of those lost, eyes hollow, voices accusing. He recognized some, friends, family, even himself. Each specter reached out, demanding to be heard. He forced himself to listen, to remember. Each memory was a burden and a key. At the heart of the darkness, a clearing opened. A circle of stones, black as night, surrounded a pit that seemed to lead into the earth itself. From the pit came a soft glow. He understood, this was the truth the forest guarded. The reason for the bargains. The price paid by those who came before. The woman stepped beside him. "Are you ready?" He nodded. Together, they peered into the pit. Inside, a scene unfolded. A ritual long forgotten. A pact made with the forest. Souls exchanged for silence, secrets buried in the roots. He saw himself again, a child whispering into the dark. And the forest listening. The pit pulsed. The ground trembled. He felt the weight of all those who had come before, trapped between worlds. He reached into the pit. His hand closed around something cold and smooth. A key. An ancient token. He pulled it free. The forest stilled. The whispers ceased. The darkness lifted. Light returned. The woman smiled. "You have the key now. But the journey is not over." He looked at her. "What comes next?" She took a deep breath. "We return." Together, they made their way back through the forest. The trees no longer loomed. The fog was gone. The forest seemed alive with song. But deep within him, he knew the forest still held its secrets. And that the price of silence was never truly paid.